Hello everyone, welcome to RockSim Live. I am Michelle. I'm the office manager here at Apogee, and Tim is out of town today, so I am taking over the RockSim Live for him. So I have a couple questions queued up that people had emailed in, and then we can go over. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll go from there. And yeah, so we can get started here. So the first question is from James Phillips. He asked about how to show in RockSim with the Zephyr how to fly it on a H100 motor. And he's saying he would use a DMS delay drilling tool, the universal delay drilling tool, to adjust the delay down to 8 seconds. So this is super easy in RockSim, which is cool. So and everybody's checking in the chat. Thank you for doing that. Let me switch to my screen here. I haven't done this in a while, and I just came from cutting plywood for our laser cutter, so I'm a little kerfuffled right now and hot and sweaty. So is the microphone? Yeah, I forgot to check it for the screen share. So here we have the screen. This is RockSim, and so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to open the Zephyr. The Zephyr comes with RockSim 10. If you don't have RockSim 10, let's say you're running RockSim 9 or 8 or some ridiculously old number, then you can download the Zephyr file from our website. So we're on our website here, and then pull up the Zephyr kit page. So all of our RockSim files for all of our kits that we sell are on the kit pages. So you can scroll down, and then we have these little shortcuts. You can click on RockSim file, and that will take you down to the bottom of the page, or you can just scroll down. And the RockSim design file is here, and you can just click on it, and it should download it like it just downloaded for me. If you click on it and you see it just opens a new tab with a bunch of text, then all you need to do is right click it, and actually this one, the image is a little bit tricky. You could also do it here, but if you right click and then save link as, you can do it from both of them. It will save the file to your desktop there. So, and then once it's downloaded, most of the kit files are zip files, so you will have to unzip them before you open them in RockSim. This one downloaded as an RKT, so you don't have to do that there. But like I said, in RockSim 10, the Zephyr comes standard, so you can either click this little folder icon to open, or you can click File Open. It'll take you to the same spot. And then it should default to the designs folder where all the kits are stored. If it doesn't, I'm on a Mac, so mine is in the applications folder. On Windows, it'd be programs x86. And then there'll be a RockSim 10 folder. Yours might be called something different. I've got a lot of test versions of RockSim on here, so, but you RockSim folder, designs. So in the designs folder, this is normally where it takes you. Then these are all the manufacturers. So the Zephyr is an Apogee kit. So I'll open Apogee up. And then in the Apogee list, we have the Zephyr. And you can double click, or you can click open. So we see the Zephyr here, the 2D side view, or you can do 3D and see it here. So once we have our rocket loaded, so one thing, James, that you'll want to do is check your built rocket against the specs for this rocket and RockSim. Everybody builds rockets differently, and so you you might use more glue than I would use, or less glue, or a lot of paint, or maybe you put a lot of paint on it, primer and paint. Maybe you painted it and then painted over it because you didn't like it, the colors. So I usually just always check the weight once I've got my built one. So you can see here on the screen, it'll tell you the mass. Mine's set to grams right now, but you can compare that, and then it'll show you your CG of your rocket. So what you're going to want to do is weigh your rocket if you have a way to do that. And then you want to find the CG point of the rocket. So what you'll do is you'll take your rocket. I didn't grab a rocket, so we will use my water bottle. This is my rocket, and I'll find that balance, that point where the rocket balances, and that's your CG point. So if yours is close to what's there, you're fine. You can leave it. If it's not, or you want it to be exact, then you can go to this mass override tab, and you'll check this box to say use the values shown below. So this is basically saying, when this isn't checked, it's saying my rocket is 1,510 grams. But I've measured my rocket and say it's only 1,000 grams. So I'm just telling RockSim, ignore the numbers you came up with by putting the nose cone and the tube and the fins together. I'm just going to tell you what the weight is. And the weight is, 1,000 grams. And then you also, don't forget this part, people forget this sometimes, have to put in this CG location. So that balance point you measure from the tip of the nose cone back, and that's the balance point, that's your center of gravity. So you'll put that number here. So say it's only like 34 instead of 36. And you could see down here when I entered that, it changed at the, I'm pointing to my screen like you guys can see it. You can see down here that it changed. So when I uncheck and check it, you can see the stability changes there. So, before you have your rocket built, you can kind of assume that what we have in there is kind of okay. Or you can always check if it's not like a kit that you got from us, but you can find it out for sale online. A lot of websites post the weight of the rocket, so you can pull it from the website that it's pulled from. But once you have your finished rocket and you're ready to kind of do your final testing for delay time, you have your motor picked out or whatever, you'll want to do that. So once you have your rocket set and your mass and your center of gravity are set good for that, set well, we're going to load the engine. So he was asking about an H100 motor. So we're going to click the Load Engines button and go to Choose Engine. And then I usually, when I am sorting, I just click engine code and sort alphabetically. It's just easier to scroll down. I don't really mess with the the filters too much. The Cicerone's turned on, which won't help us find that Airtech motor, will it? So usually I leave the filters alone. Every once in a while things are weird. Like if you saw that CTI popped up and said of Cicerone. So I just don't use the filters much because it's not hard to scroll through. So it's in alphabetical order. I just clicked on here, and you can organize it by, burn time or engine code or whatever. And we're going to scroll down to the H100, which should be in there. All the motors were updated in RockSim 10, current to, right now, current to maybe last summer, midsummer. So those should be good there. The H100's been around for a while. And then for the delay time, this has a max delay of 10, but I don't think that's right in here. Let's look this up. It might be. There's only a couple that have 10-second delays, so here we go. Yeah, it's a -14. So whoever made this motor file, made it incorrectly, but that's fine. We can just go over this, and instead of selecting from the list of plugged, custom, or 10, we can just type in 14 and hit tab. And generally for your first attempt in RockSim with this, you're going to want to use like a really long delay, or the longest delay the motor has to start, and then we can kind of hone in on that delay time if we need to a little further with that. So the H100 comes with a 14-second delay, so we've loaded that in. if I haven't done RockSim in a while, I usually check just some little things like my starting state. The last rocket I did in here, I only had a 3-foot rod. That's, that's for like a little Alpha Avion type rocket. So I changed that to be my launch guide length. If you don't know what it is, you can err on the side of caution. For something like the Zephyr, you wouldn't have anything less than really 8 feet would be ideal. But I know there are some clubs that have rails that are like 6 feet long. So if your club has one of those, you can always run it with the 6 foot. You want to go with the smallest size, like the shortest rail you can, because you want your rocket to be going 30 miles per hour when it leaves the rail or rod. And the shorter it is, the less time it has to get there. So that can make a big difference. On the H100 might work fine for an 8-foot rod, but on a 6-foot rod, it might not be powerful enough to get it to that 32 miles an hour when it's leaving the rod. So if you don't know, err on the side of caution, but 8 feet is kind of standard for a regular 1010 rail. For that, you can check your conditions if you want. Mine stay pretty constant. I don't mess with that too much for this. So, and then when you're ready, you can click the launch button. And this crashed. Why did this crash? That's a good, oh, somehow it was listed as plugged. You can see it says H100-P. Plugged means that the parachute never deploys. So of course it crashed. So let's try that again. There we go. Didn't take my change the first time. So now you can see this H100, it didn't crash. And so we have the optimal delay listed here. Let me switch this around so it's at the top. So the optimal delay for my rocket, which I have, we put in the mass and the center of gravity location, has an optimal delay of 8.36 seconds. So that's kind of where you would probably hone in on. If you know your launch conditions a little better, you can, put in the wind, your altitude, things like that. Mine is always, we set ours for when we do like motor charts to a constant speed of 8 miles per hour. 8's, on the higher end of when it's okay to fly. Once you get over 10, then it can get a little dicey with gusts and things. So 8's conservative. Like if you put no wind, there are a lot of rockets, that will fly stable, but as soon as a tiny itty bitty gust of wind comes, your rocket could go unstable. So you want to err on the side of a little too much wind maybe when you're doing this. And most places right now have a lot of wind, so Colorado is super windy a lot of the time, so you can always do that. So yeah, so that will give you your kind of estimated delay. That's going to go about 2,000 feet. It's going to hit 307 miles per hour. And then if you want to see the simulation, which also is kind of what in this case, we set the delay to 14 instead of 8. So it's going to be coming back down for about 6 seconds before the parachute pops. And so you can see here as it goes, it's coming down. And now, yeah, it pops all the way down. So you can see in the visual too, the 2D profile, that's what that looks like. So that was a little fast, but hopefully that answered your question. Oops, clicked on the wrong thing. James, so, yep, and so he said he was looking at probably adjusting his delay down to about 8 seconds, and that's what I'm seeing here too. So sounds about right with that. And then the next question that was emailed was asking about how to add a switchband to a rocket. And so he bought a kit and he downloaded a kit file from the Mad Cow website because he bought it from Mad Cow. And so he added a switchband to make the coupler function better. So switchband, in case you don't know, so you have a rocket and you have a rocket that separates in the middle. Usually like dual deployment, if you've got two parachutes and you've got electronics where the parachutes are popping out at different times. So you have a coupler that holds the two. Let me zoom out here. This Zephyr's not a good. Let me pull up a different one. Pull up the Peregrine. Okay, so this is the Peregrine, and this kit has a body tube here. So that's the front body tube, and this is the back body tube. And in between, in here, is a coupler that holds the two tubes together. And inside that coupler is where you put your electronics and things. And even if you don't use electronics, if you separate here, then you've got a bulkhead disc, which is what that is. But the problem is if you don't have anything, you have to figure out a way to kind of hold it all together, and or the coupler would just slide right through, because you can't really, if you glue it in, then you can't get to the electronics one way or the other. So anyways, so one of the things you can do is you can actually put a body tube around the middle of the coupler and glue it in place, and then it sits between the two tubes. It's pinched between them. And it holds that coupler in place. And then when you pull the kit apart, you can access the electronics from either side, because you haven't glued the coupler into one end. And I think we have a picture of Switchband here. So you can see this is a blue tube example, but you can see that's actually a piece of body tube that's just cut very short for this eBay. And so here's a diagram with that same thing. There's the Switchband there. So as I sort of alluded to, the way to add a Switchband to a rocket is you just add a body tube, because all you're doing is adding a body tube that's just really short. We just don't think of it that way because it's not a body tube in the normal sense. So let me open my Zephyr's not a good one. Let me open, I know one that has, assuming we have, okay. So this is the MagCow Super DX3. It's similar to the Peregrine. So it's got this front body tube, it's got the back body tube, and then it's got the coupler inside, which isn't clickable on the 2D, but so you can see the coupler inside. This one does not have a Switchband, so you have to glue the coupler in one of the ends, and then you kind of lose access. So we're going to add a Switchband to this. So the way to do that is you go to your rocket design components. So this is a list of all the parts in the rocket, and then you pick the part for external parts. So body tubes would be external. You pick the part in front of kind of where you want to attach it to the back end of. So in this case, you've got the front body tube that you want to attach the Switchband to. So we're actually going to add a body tube by just clicking on here, and then we can pick from the database. I don't know if any Switchbands are actually in here, but if you have a body tube, that would fit. So our like a lock body tube would be pretty close, so we'll use that, except this is 34 inches long. So most Switchbands are about 1 inch long, so all we're going to do is change the length to 1 inch, and you can see that switch down here. I'll change it again. You can watch that as I see it gets longer or shorter. And then yeah, and now my rocket has this body tube here. And you can see this, so the body tube below it, that back body tube, moved back by 1 inch. Because the way RockSim works, if you collapse these are the external parts that show up here. And then when you click the little down arrows, it shows you the internal. So we've got the nose cone, we've got the front body tube, we've got our new Switchband, which call it that. And it's called other things too. Switchband is just common. And then that back body tube. So it's actually really easy to do, to add a switchband in there to that rocket. So there's that question. Okay, oh good. So we have questions in the chat too. Okay. And then third question that came up and is related kind of, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit, is somebody was asking about using a kit. In this case, he was asking about the G-force kit, and he wants to use a motor in it that's not listed in our motor chart. And if you go to, let me go to the, let's see this, okay. If you go to the Zephyr page, let me just show you. These are all the motors listed in the Zephyr. There's a million. And then these are ones that you can even fly out. Like the Zephyr has a 38mm motor mount. You can put a 29mm adapter and fly 29mm motors. So then there are additional motors in here. So, but if we go to the G-force, you know, this list is kind of long, but like there are a lot of 29mm motors. Like, why is this list so short? And so there are two potential answers. One is there's something about the rocket that just makes it not able to be flown on a lot of motors. There are a couple kits that are like that, especially fiberglass heavy kits. Even if it's like a 29mm motor, like if you have a 29mm motor mount and a like heavy fiberglass kit, like tubing, there may not be a lot of motors that can lift that weight in that side. So that's one option. In the case of older kits, either older kits that just have been around for a while, or we've been carrying for a while, what we used to do is we would, there were a lot of motors, and in RockSim, before RockSim 10, so I had showed you how to run a motor simulation. So imagine, you know, there's hundreds of 2900, like well, not hundreds, but there's a lot of 29mm motors, a lot of 38mm motors. We had to run that simulation that we just did, you know, load engine, choose engine, you know, find an engine that fits, and we have to go through, change the delay, okay, launch, for every single motor. And so, and then for every single kit, we have over 300 kits we carry. So you're potentially talking, you know, 300 times, especially if you use adapters, could be a couple hundred motors. That's a lot of time. So, and we don't have a dedicated RockSim motor simulation runner. And so what we did for that was that we would pick like every casing size, and we would run at least one motor from each casing size. So thered be a 2940 120. There would be maybe the single use. There'd be a Cesaroni 1 grain, Cesaroni 2 grain, 2960, 29100. So we would run one motor from each case. A lot of times, for a while, that was the classic, you know, standard White Lightning motor from Aerotech or Cesaroni. Sometimes I would run, especially if there was lower thrust, I would run those two to give people warnings. But basically, we would run the lower end motors so that you knew, okay, if this H90 can fly okay, then I have an H100 that's probably fine. That may not actually be true, but it was the best we could do with the limited manpower and time we had. And so now in RockSim 10, we finally got this feature. Tim has wanted it for so long. If you go to, you can actually run all the motors for a rocket that will fit the motor mount size and also be smaller. So say I just got this super cool DX3 kit, Super DX3, and I want to know what motor should I buy for it. So you can run them all one at a time like we did, or when you go to the prepare for launch button, instead of choosing an engine, you can click the recommended motors button, and then in here you can choose, this will just run the motors that match the motor mount size, which is 38 in this case. but you can check the box to actually include smaller motors. So if you put a 29 millimeter adapter in there, then you can run 38, and it'll run 38, 29, 24, 18, 6 millimeter, you know, all the smaller ones. Obviously a 6 millimeter motor is not going to lift this 4-inch kit, but it runs all of them. It checks. And you can filter by manufacturer, you can filter by engine type. This one's a little tricky because not all the motor files have that in the actual file. We don't make most of the motor files, other people do. And so if you filter by these, be aware that they may filter out motors that actually like are reloads or are whatever single use. And then the one parameter you have to put in is what is your launch guide length. And for bigger rockets, this starts at 5. For the smaller, if you had a little tiny, you know, Alpha Avion type rocket, it starts at, I think, 3. Might be 1, actually. I haven't used this in a while. And so you have to set your launch guide length, because as I said before, you have to get to 30 miles per hour when you reach the end of the launch rod. And so that's the one thing RockSim just like can't know without you telling it, how long the launch rod is. And then if you click use recommended conditions, those are the ones that are up here that Apogee uses. It uses that 8 mile per hour wind that I talked about. Or if you want to use your own values, you know, you put in the wind, you're launching at a really quiet wind-wise site or something, you can use your own values. And then you can run this and it will run all the motors. Because this is a 38, this will take a little while, and it will actually pull a lot of, you know, RAM from your computer, because what it does is it runs it first to see which of them are, will hit that, I think that 30, it runs it twice. So it runs the first time and says, will it hit 30 miles per hour off the launch rod? And then it runs it again to check like altitudes and optimal delays and things. I think that's how it works. It's been a while since I've gone over that. But so yeah, so it'll run all those. If I run this, we'll be here for a while to look at it. But long story, very long. What that does is it will generate a list. Let me go back to my Zephyr, because I don't have it here either. Let me pick a smaller rocket so we're not here until the end of time running this. We'll run the Blue Streak. So click here, recommended motors. So it is 3 feet, okay. So I'm gonna run all of them, use my recommended conditions. So see, it's only running 25 motors. If we had run the 38s, it'd be a lot. So it generates this recommended motor chart. So now, instead of having to do them one at a time, I can run all the motors, and it takes maybe a couple minutes to run the whole thing. So then we can go and, like on the Zephyr page, we can put every motor, you know, that comes in this list that shows up as safe. The only problem with this is that, well, what if Aerotech or Cesaroni or Estes or Quest releases a new motor? Well, then we still have to go through and add that. And we also still have to do this process for all 300 kits. So what that means is that for the older kits, especially ones that aren't our own kits, we just haven't gone back and updated these motor charts. These are from when we were doing them by hand a long time ago. And so there may be, I'm sure there are other motors that work in some of these kits, especially if you see a small list for a big diameter rocket. For like small kits like the Blue Streak or the Avion, there are only like 25 motors that even fit in an 18 millimeter motor mount. So the list is going to be small anyways. But for these bigger ones, there should be a lot more options. So what that means is you can use RockSim to do exactly what we just did. So for the person who asked about the G-force list, you can go ahead and open up the G-force, run those recommended motors, and see all the ones. So this list shows, right now I have it set so it's showing all the motors that were run. But if you right click, I'm not seeing it here. There's a way to hide the non-recommended ones, and I am for some reason not seeing this here. So I'll have to look. I'm sure it's somewhere. I'm just missing it somewhere obvious. But it will tell you all the motors. So, so then you can, go from there. So that saves everybody. I mean, this was a feature that is useful to customers, but honestly, like, game changer for us doing our motor charts, because that Zephyr, when we first released it, we had to do all the motors by hand. And I literally had an employee who sat there and ran every single stinking 38 millimeter motor. And what happened was, when she was running it, somewhere along the way, her launch guide got set to 90 degrees. So she ran all these motors, and halfway through, none of the motors worked. And she couldn't figure out why, and we couldn't figure out why at first. And then we went and looked, and the rocket was launching horizontally. So of course the motors didn't work. So be aware that that can be an issue. So she had to go back and rerun like half of those couple hundred motors because the setting had gotten tweaked somehow and we missed it. So yeah, so this is a really useful feature, and we are trying, we do try and update these. If I have a customer who asks about one, and I have the time, I will definitely go run it and then update it. But I don't promise to do that for everybody. But I will try and update them as I go. But again, we get it completely updated and then Aerotech releases a brand new motor. We're probably not going to go back and update those. We just don't have the time for that. Maybe someday if we can get everything synced up and have it run automatically, but not at this point. So those are all my emailed questions. So let me look at the chat, and everybody says hello. We've got people from all over the world, which is awesome. So Tom Goudreau asks, if one was to load, use a Jolly Logic shoot release, how is it best to show that delayed parachute deployment? It is not really dual deployment, but I guess you could set it as such. So it actually, we have to do dual deployment, we actually fudge that. So this really wouldn't be any different than that. And the easiest way to do it is just set your motor delay. So you would, it's a little tricky because of the way the shoot release works. It works based on altitude. With dual deployment too, it works with altitude. So the problem is in regular RockSim, let me pull up my Peregrine again, because this will be a dual deployment. And even if you're not doing electronic dual deployment, you're doing delayed deployment. Well, I guess you're even using it for the single deployment. It's possible, but so when you go to load your engine, this is the screen that you also do your flight events at. And so this one has 2 parachutes. Let me open this up so you can see. And they're set to deploy at max ejection delay. So for the shoot release, well, the same with dual deployment, what you'll do is you'll actually set it for, I was thinking this wasn't in RockSim for some reason. I haven't used RockSim in a while. I need to brush up on it a little bit for all these. I use it in a very specific way, and I don't always use these other things. So you can set it to deploy at altitude. So whether you have 1 parachute or 2, you set your shoot release, and let me bring up the shoot release. You can show everybody if they don't know what that is. It's actually a really nifty device. So like dual deployment, you set your shoot release to deploy at a certain altitude after Apogee. And it's really cool. It's this little gadget that you, let's see if there's a picture here. You set the altitude, and then you wrap here we go. So you wrap it around your parachute, and it's just a rubber band, and then it flies, and then at the altitude it's set at, the pin, this little pin, pops out, and the rubber band just unwraps from the parachute, and it deploys your parachute. So it's a really nifty way to delay your parachute deployment if you don't want to mess with black powder, for dual deployment. You don't want to mess with electronics. It's just a neat kind of alternative for it. So that's what he's talking about, is using this instead of dual deployment. In RockSim, it's all the same. It doesn't know the difference. Even dual deployment, we're kind of, like I said, tricking it. So you'll just set your parachute to deploy at altitude and say you're going to deploy it at 300 feet for your one parachute, and these parachutes are very helpfully not labeled where they're at. So, and then you set your other one. If you have two, then your chute release may deploy at a certain time. You're usually one deploys at apogee, and then the other one deploys at an altitude or a time after for that. Okay, so it is really doable, but I guess you can set as such. So yeah, so that's how you would set up a chute release. It's the same deal. You're basically saying deploy it at a certain altitude, and that can work for one parachute too. And then placing the Jolly Logic mass object, do you find it best to place that as far back in the main body tube as possible, or to keep it a bit ahead given parachute shield spacing, shrouds? So I'm not sure. Yes, this is, and Tom, as Tom points out, this is altitude above ground level. So when you get into RockSim Pro, then you can set other things a little bit more complicated, but this is just altitude above ground level. And then I'm a little unclear. I'm assuming you're talking about in RockSim and not in real life about the mass object, which makes sense. Really, RockSim doesn't really care at the end of the day where it's located here, because all it really cares about is where the center of gravity is. So it doesn't really matter if you put it in the nose cone, you put it in the motor mount. I mean, in terms of like, you can put it wherever you want. You just need your center of gravity to be in the right place. A chute release is, oh, I see what you're saying. So he's saying as the rocket accelerates, that will move rearward. So, if you set your center of gravity, you set your chute release to be here, but then as it goes, it moves rearward. That's going to pull your center of gravity back, which makes the rocket less stable. So if you're worried about it, if you're worried about it moving, you would the conservative way to do it is I would put that mass as far back as you think it might get. So, you've got your rocket cavity of, here's my body tube again, and you put the chute release here, but by the time it actually deploys, as it's going up, it's slowly kind of moving back here. So I would you want to err on the side of it, because even if you just you put it upright, even before it launches, gravity is going to be pulling it down too. So I don't really know how much those move, how much parachutes move around in there because like I said, once you move it upright, it's pretty, the gravity's already pulling it down. But to be conservative, you want to put it as far back as possible, because that's going to pull your center of gravity back, which means your margin is going to get smaller, and then your rocket could be less stable. Depending on your rocket, it would have to move a lot probably to really make it unstable. But yeah, that would be, whenever you're doing simulations, the rule of thumb would be go as conservative as possible, or worst case scenario. I'm building my rocket and I already know it's going to be heavier. Put in what you think it might be. You can always lighten it up later. That my stuff might move, put it back as far as possible, because you want to err on the side of it being less stable, because it's easier to make it it's easier to fix that than the other way, I guess. If you assume it's going to slide back, so then you have to add nose weight to move your center of gravity back forward. Overstable is not so much of an issue. Like, you can be overstable quite a bit, and it's going to do is mean your rocket's going to correct a little bit more, but it's not going to go unstable. Whereas if you err on the side of, it's going to stay in the front, it'll be fine, and then it slides backward, and suddenly your rocket went from stable to unstable, then you have a rocket that potentially could be dangerous. At the very least, it could cause a terrible flight for that. So when in doubt, definitely, I would say do that. Yeah, so looks like Tom's the one with all the questions today in the chat, which is fine. We still have another 20 minutes technically, and but a baffle might limit slip and add weight forward if you put it forward enough. Yeah, it just really depends on how big that compartment is that you're putting it in. If you really want it to stay forward, you need to put something in there to kind of hold it up, a bulkhead, even if it's just temporary or something in there for that. So we don't have any other questions right now. So I'm going to show you the launch visualizer because it's Tim's favorite thing in the world right now. So that's the other part of the questions about running simulations. We did it all in RockSim, but we actually can do, you can't edit the rocket in the launch visualizer, but you can, all the simulations we ran can be run here too. So, so the questions about, did my rocket, can my rocket fly on this H100 motor? What motors can the G-force run on? Things like that. Even testing Tom's theory a little bit about, well, you can't move the center of gravity so much, so that one wouldn't necessarily be possible. But yeah, so the launch visualizer is it's basically a fancy version of this 2D little cartoon. That's in RockSim. So we can see the rocket going up, but obviously this is a little outdated technology. It's great for just like basic, I use it to, do a quick check if I don't want to look at the numbers to see when parachutes pop out, or it's just a quick visual for that. But we had planned with RockSim Pro years and years ago to do a 3D version, and it just never quite came to fruition. We finally got around to making this launch visualizer. And so the website is rocksim.com. And if you want to learn more about it in general, Tim talks about it every week in these RockSim Lives. And as a reminder for all of you, the way to get to the RockSim Live archive of all the previous ones, if you go to How To and Guides, Software, and then RockSim Live Trading. Ooh, I got the yawns now. This is where all the previous RockSim Lives are. They have the topics and the timestamps. So if you see something like, hey, I really want to know how to put styrofoam plugs in my RockSim design, you can open the YouTube video and then go to 19 minutes and 33 seconds in and watch Tim do that. And he always talks about the launch visualizer. So the website is rocksim.com, the launch visualizer. It is free to use for certain features. So you can use it without even logging in. You can just go and choose a design. You're limited to the demo designs in here. And you're limited to certain motors. So each of these tabs are settings like we saw when you load your engine. So this is basically the load engine part of RockSim, but a little fancier. So all of these tabs that we use to set the launch guide and all that, that's what these tabs are here on this. And when you come and you're not logged in at all, almost everything's locked. You can just, all you can really do is select a motor and fly the rocket. And you're limited to A through D motors, so you can only fly the small rockets. Once you, oh, it's not showing it because I'm logged in already. And then the next step is to create an account on here, so you're logged in, but it's still free, and that opens up the ability to save your own rocket designs. So you can upload a file if you have a custom one, or if you just have a rocket, even from RockSim, that's not in here. You can just upload it here, select, but so you can see, like, I have just a couple kits saved in here. So I want to fly the Peregrine rocket. Takes a second to reload, but there's my Peregrine there. And then you have access to your motor selection. In this case, if you're logged in, it's called a basic user. You're limited in A through G motors, so you can still fly. You can fly all low and mid power motors, And then you can set, you have a little bit more flexibility in setting your launch angle. There we go. It's green up to 30 degrees and then it turns red, and I was like, why is it red at 12? So you can mess with more of them. And then the third tier is a paid subscription. We have a monthly subscription. Right now it's just a couple dollars a month to do, and that unlocks everything. So you can upload your design files, you can choose launch sites from all over, upload your own launch sites. You can upload ridiculous launch sites. You know, I want to launch from the Eiffel Tower. You can put, as long as you know the GPS, the longitude and latitude coordinates, you can put any site you want. You can change all the different angles and things, set the weather. It unlocks all of the engines. There's different flight events here, just like in RockSim where we were talking about how to set when it like deployed altitude. We can do that like we did for the shoot release. I'm sorry. And then we have the motor list, and we're working on a couple new features for this to make it even more user friendly. So hopefully we'll be seeing those here shortly. And yeah, and then when you launch, you're given a certain number of credits based on the total impulse of the motor. So let's pick this H123, and then I'm going to launch. And so the H123 has a total impulse of 212, I guess. So it's going to use up 212 of my points. And then this is what's left over. So you're given a set amount. If you want more, you can do the paid account, the subscription. That gives you a little bit more than the basic one. And then you can also buy booster credits. So if you have a paid subscription and you run out, we have a couple people who are flying like a bunch of M motors. So they're just like blasting through their credits, which is crazy. And so you can buy more credits too. But you click simulate, and then it's going to run the simulation. And flying my Peregrine. I think we're at the launch site down in Pueblo, which is our kind of semi-local launch site. And then I set the delay at 14, which is way too long. So as you can see, it's already... Oh. So did it pop out at all? Or did it hit the ground? Oh, it popped out right there. So, so yeah, I was a little bit late for that. And then you have the same specs that you have on your, in RockSim, so you can test all that. So this is a fun feature, it's a kind of a new to us product, and we have plans going forward to increase it, make it better. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of a fun thing. I encourage everybody to try it out. I mean, even if you just use the basic not logged in version, it's kind of fun to see. You can rerun it. You can zoom out so you can see more. So this is our launch site. I think this is our launch site. You can see the car is parked from whenever this was taken there. And you can, when you have the higher level accounts, you can play with the different settings. Yeah, we don't actually flown yet, but so you can set your smoke color and different things. You can change your view. So like this is a view of like if you had a camera on the rocket. It's a little close up, so. This is pretty much what the camera would see too. So now we're pointed up at the sky because the delay was too long. But yeah, so it's kind of fun to see. You could launch from your backyard, which you can't do. Most of us can't do in real life for that. And so Tom asks, is the old RockSim Pro functions, features, math in the launch visualizer? So the quick answer, I think, is yes. It's the same RockSim Pro. using the same mathematical formulas and things. Some of it, a little bit of it has been tweaked based on, you know, as we found things. We are working, I don't know if Tim's talked about this or not, but we should have a couple updates for RockSim and RockSim Pro, the desktop version, hopefully in the next couple weeks. It was like, it's been next week, but then it keeps getting pushed back. So we worked out a couple tweaks. I'm not sure about the math side of RockSim Pro. How much of that has been, the core of it is the same. Tim has some big dreams about some of the things we want to do to make it, you know, better and as accurate as possible, but you're getting into some pretty hardcore math, and you need a math person and a programmer person kind of to be the same person to kind of work on stuff like that. So it's a little tricky to nail down, you know, the right kind of people to work on projects like that too. So we are definitely Tim has lots of ideas. You guys know Tim. He always has hopes and dreams, and you know, we're busy working on, you know, getting this done, and he's like, and by the way, can we add this cool feature, or can we do this? So he's constantly evolving, and that's the cool thing about the browser version is, like, the changes that are coming, they might be pushed in the next week, and they're small changes right now. We don't have anything big coming real soon, but literally they just can push them. Whereas the desktop version of RockSim, it's the software, you have to, you know, get all the coding right, and then you have to package it into a box, like a package, basically, the software, so that then it can be distributed, and then you have to manually install it on your computer. And you know, so the desktop version's a lot harder to update, whereas this, you know, they just push it and it's there, and if there's another fix, they just push that too, and so it's updated in real time, which is why we're hoping long term to get a cloud-based version of regular RockSim, the building design part too, but it's trickier than we thought it would be for that. So yes, Tom says always dream big, and Tim is a big dreamer. He has lots of ideas and things. It's just a matter of execution, you know, finding the right people, finding the right funding. You know, some of these things take a lot of money to do, and we've got some big hopes for this year in terms of projects and things, products, and so it's just a matter of everything sort of coming together, and in some of the cases, you know, supply chain issues that we're seeing all over are hitting us too. Hiring issues, we're understaffed as like everybody else, so we're just trying to do the best we can with what we have, and we're working hard for you guys. Still shipping your orders out every day by the 2 p.m. cutoff, or 3 p.m. if you're a VIR, and you know, answering phones and emails, trying to do the chats and things like that. Just really we really focus on customer service and customer interaction here. So hopefully that helps you guys out. And if you have any other questions, you can always email them. Like I said, I had 3 that were emailed this week. When I realized that I had to do the RockSim Live and Tim was going to be gone, I was like, please let people have emailed questions so I can prepare ahead of time. So it's nice if you have those. And Tim, I think Tim answered all of those people in real time too. So it's not like you have to wait for the RockSim Live to get an answer, unless you say, hey, can you in the RockSim Live go over? But yeah. So, and then Tom asks, we got a couple minutes left, so we'll go ahead. Is there any advice for using RockSim for boost glider simulations? Just beginning to try and scratch those kits in the tool. And the answer is kind of not really. RockSim can't simulate the glide. There's too many variables that go on. I'll try and do a quick answer. If Tim has a better one too, he can go over that next week with it, because he does more competition stuff and boost glider. But you just can't simulate the glide part of it, because boosters, I mean, if you've ever flown a glider, even just thrown a paper airplane, you know that You could throw it 15 times and it could go 15 different ways. And then that doesn't account for wind or anything. So the glider part is just beyond the capabilities of RockSim right now. You can simulate the boost portion of it, kind of, but because boosters are, gliders are so weird, really shaped, I don't know if we have any. We have some like more of the standard ones, but like the mini Condor. So here's a glider here. So you can make it in RockSim. Let me do the 3D. But because of these crazy wings and things, I don't know how really accurate the simulation's going to be. Just because of the kind of goofiness of that. If you could figure out the coefficient of drag on this accurately, then you can plug that into RockSim even. There's this CD override tab, and if you know it, like you actually like took it to a wind tunnel or something, or used an AeroCFD program to figure out your CD, you can actually override RockSim and put them in here, and then your simulation might be more accurate. But I just don't know that with it being so wonky. It's the same with any sort of odd rocket. You know, you fly a pumpkin or a Christmas tree or anything like that. It just, RockSim makes some basic assumptions about rockets, and gliders are just kind of odd. I will definitely ask Tim about that and see if he wants to talk about it more next week, to see if he has any more thoughts on that. It may be more accurate than I realize. I'm just kind of talking out of my gut feeling on it, is just that it's weird enough. And you'll notice, like, we have this one in RockSim, but I wasn't sure. Some of our gliders aren't even in here because it's just so inaccurate. It's kind of misleading to put them in. But yeah, so it is possible. So he says, so you don't really trust Apogee. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say, because again, it comes up with that, what is the coefficient of drag of this rocket? And Tim may be able to talk better about how accurate he thinks it is next week, so I'll definitely pass that on. I just don't know, when you start to get beyond a standard rocket where you get the offside, the weights offside, or the wings offside. We built in the pods so that it's possible to make these, but I don't know how the math holds up, really. And Tim's answer might be, go fly it and then come back to RockSim and compare, which is kind of the way everything is, because even, RockSim is only as good as the information that's put in there, and, you can only know so much for your rocket. So yeah. So that's basically time for today. So I think we are done. Thank you for having patience with me today. Am I losing my voice a little bit? Tim should be back next week. He's got a bunch of stuff going on this summer, so he'll be kind of in and out. But he should be back next week. And so yeah, email in any questions you have, and for us, so he could prepare for that. And keep using RockSim, try out the launch visualizer. If you have feedback, if you run into any bugs or any issues, we know about a bunch of them in RockSim, and that's part of what's coming out, is some of the fixes for that, some of those crashes. But you guys are the ones using RockSim, and you use RockSim differently than we do. For example, we had a walk-in customer come in maybe 2 weeks ago now, and he was like, when I go to this table, I can't sort by the header. And I looked at him and I was like, what are you talking about? And it turns out that he was adding parts to the database using a totally different method than I use. And they both work, they both go to the same place, but he was getting there a different way, and the table headers are broken. That is going to be fixed in the next update. But it's like, I didn't even know those tables were there, because I go a different way to get to them. And so yeah, so you guys use RockSim in very different ways than we do. And so yeah, definitely send us, questions or whatever, feedback, if you have any issues. and we can only make RockSim better if we have feedback, and so we appreciate you guys doing that. So I think that's all for today. So I will see you guys all next week.